There are fence posts in the American South that were driven into the ground before the Civil War, not replaced since, not treated, not maintained, still standing, still solid. Contractors who pull them to run new fencing sometimes stop and stare. The wood looks almost new. Below the soil line, the zone that destroys everything. It is smooth and pale and clean. They tap it with a knuckle. It rings like stone. Meanwhile, the pressure-treated pine your neighbor sank in 2010 is already soft at the base. By 2030, it will be compost. He will spend $1,200 replacing it, and the cycle will start again. The men who drove those 170-year-old posts knew something that was systematically removed from American building culture. Not forgotten by accident. Removed. Because what they were using solved the problem permanently. And a permanent solution to a recurring problem is a disaster for anyone selling the solution. The wood is Black Locust. And this is the story of how the toughest timber on the continent was buried alive. The United States pressure-treated lumber market is worth approximately 9.3 billion board feet annually. Source: American Wood Protection Association Market Data, 2023. Every decade or so, a significant portion of that market replaces wood that rotted. Decks, fence posts, retaining walls, piers. The replacement cycle is the revenue engine. What you are about to hear will change how you look at every lumberyard you have ever walked through. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how Black Locust performs against every material currently sold at Home Depot and Lowe's, why the US supply chain deliberately kept it off shelves, the 3 things you need to know before sourcing it, what Hungary figured out that America did not, and how you can use it right now on your property legally, affordably, and with results that will outlive you. This is not a niche topic for survivalists or homesteaders. This is a story about market engineering, ecological intelligence, and what happens when a material is too good to be profitable. We have to go back to 1607, Jamestown, Virginia. 17 colonists are dead. 50 more are sick. The survivors are scrambling to frame shelters before winter locks them in. They are not engineers. They are merchants, soldiers, and gentlemen farmers, dropped into a wilderness they do not understand. But they watch. They watch what the Powhatan use. 4 posts, 1 at each corner, driven into the ground, walls built between them, simple, fast, and constructed from a wood the colonists initially dismiss as a crooked, difficult tree with vicious thorns. Black Locust, Robinia pseudoacacia, native to the Appalachian Highlands. 100 years later, in 1707, naturalist Mark Catesby visits the ruins of early Jamestown structures during his survey of the colonial flora. What he finds stops him cold. Those original corner posts, the ones sunk in raw, wet Virginia soil a full century earlier, are still standing, still sound, both above and below the ground. Catesby writes in his notes that the posts appear as though they were sunk yesterday. Source: Catesby, M. Natural History of Carolina, Florida, and the Bahama Islands, 1731 to 1743. No treatment, no maintenance, 100 years of rain, freeze, thaw, insects, and microbial life, nothing. The Cherokee and the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, had known this for generations. They carved bows from Black Locust, because no other native wood combined its particular mix of hardness, flexibility, and resilience. Tool handles, structural posts, anything that needed to last and bear weight. They called it, in various translations, the wood that refuses to die. By the early 19th century, the young American Navy was discovering the same truth in a more violent context. The War of 1812 placed American shipbuilders against the British Royal Navy, at the time, the most powerful maritime force on Earth. The British fastened their hull planks with iron pins. American shipwrights used tree nails, wooden pegs, typically Black Locust, that were slightly oversized for their holes. When the wood got wet, the tree nails swelled, creating bonds tighter than any metal fastener of the era, and critically, flexible under the shock of cannon impact. When cannonballs struck British oak hulls, iron fastenings sheared and planks separated. American ships, fastened with Black Locust tree nails, held their structure under the same impacts. The British Naval Command was not slow to figure this out. By 1820, Philadelphia was exporting between 50,000 and 100,000 Black Locust tree nails to England every year. Source: Michaud, F.A., The North American Silva, 1819. The enemy's navy was rebuilding itself with American wood, the same wood American lumberyards would, within a century, essentially stop selling. The material science behind these stories is not mythology. Black Locust registers 1,700 pounds force on the Janka hardness scale, harder than white oak at 1,360, harder than hickory at 1,820, only when green, and dramatically harder than the southern yellow pine that forms the backbone of today's pressure-treated market. Source: USDA Forest Service, Wood Handbook, 2021. Its crushing strength reaches 10,200 pounds per square inch, comparable to structural concrete. These are not small differences, they are in a different category, But the number that matters most is this. Independent tests by the U.S. Forest Service found that black locust in ground contact takes approximately 100 years to rot. Source: USDA Forest Products Laboratory, Decay Resistance Studies. The Ford Island Bridge in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, built in the 1910s, used black locust pilings that remain structurally sound after a century in saltwater, one of the most aggressive decay environments on Earth. Telegraph poles installed in the American West during the 1870s are still standing 150 years later. At the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina, a black locust pergola constructed over 100 years ago remains intact. At Harvard Forest in Massachusetts, fence posts from a century ago have been documented and measured. Solid. Source: Harvard Forest Long-Term Ecological Research Program. The tree also contains robinin, a natural flavonoid compound that kills fungi and repels wood-boring insects at the cellular level without any external chemical application. The durability is not accidental. It is engineered by evolution across tens of millions of years, a tree that survives by making its own wood uninhabitable for the organisms that consume everything else. And then there is what black locust does to the ground around it. It is one of fewer than a dozen hardwood species on Earth capable of nitrogen fixation. Rhizobium bacteria colonize its root system and pull atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, converting it to bioavailable ammonia. Studies show soil in black locust groves contains 1.3 to 3.2 times more nitrogen than surrounding areas. Source: Boring, L.R. and Swank, W.T. Forest Ecology and Management, 1984. It fixes 75 to 150 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year, without synthetic fertilizer, without irrigation, without human management. When American ranchers cleared millions of acres of black locust stands to open cattle range in the late 1800s, the consequences were slow but catastrophic. Within 2 decades, the topsoil cracked, rivers ran lower, native grasses died back. Cattle that had grazed the same land for generations were starving. The tree that the industry had called a weed, invasive, prolific, a nuisance, had been holding the entire ecosystem together. By the 1970s, ecologists had reclassified it as a keystone species, critical for soil stability and land reclamation on degraded ground. Source: Vitkova, M. et al., Forest Ecology and Management, 2017. An Indian chemist named Santi Kamisum, working in Calcutta, synthesizes a wood preservative compound, chromated copper arsenate, or CCA, a mixture of chromium, copper, and arsenic. It makes cheap, fast-growing pine last long enough to sell with confidence. Source: Richardson, B.A., Wood Preservation, 1993. By the 1940s, CCA-treated lumber has swept the American market. The economics are immediately obvious to anyone running a lumber business. Soft pine grows fast, machines easily, and ships straight. It requires no specialty milling. A sawmill built for pine can process millions of board feet a year with standardized equipment and predictable yields. Black locust grows crooked as it competes for light. Its tension wood warps when sawn, unless managed with expertise that takes years to develop. The locust borer, a native beetle, drills tunnels through trunks, making quality milling even harder. For an industrial supply chain optimized for straight, predictable, high-volume throughput, black locust is a problem. But there is a second layer to this story, one that the lumber industry never had to articulate publicly because the market logic was invisible to consumers. CCA-treated pine sold in 1950 needed to be replaced by sometime sooner. A fence built in 1955 was back at the lumberyard by New sales, new margin, new growth. Black locust fence posts installed in 1950 do not need replacement until 2050. 3 generations of no repurchase. The math is simple. Planned obsolescence beats permanence. It always does, until the customer figures it out. The system reinforced itself automatically. Lumberyards did not stock black locust because no major distributor pushed it. Contractors did not specify it because it was not at their suppliers. Homeowners never asked for it because they had never heard of it. The absence created the ignorance, and the ignorance justified the absence. A closed loop, invisible to everyone inside it. By the 1990s, the CCA story developed a darker chapter. Studies revealed that the arsenic in treated lumber leached into surrounding soil and groundwater. Children playing on CCA-treated playground equipment had measurable blood arsenic levels. In November 2003, the Environmental Protection Agency concluded that children in warm climates who regularly use CCA-treated decks faced a cancer risk of 1 in 100,000, 10 times above the agency's threshold of concern, which is 1 in 1,000. Source: US EPA, Chromated Copper Arsenate, CCA Risk Assessment, 2003. First of that year, CCA was banned for residential applications. The industry pivoted quickly to alkaline copper quaternary, ACQ, and copper azole. The arsenic was gone, the rot rate was not. Treated lumber still decayed in 15 to 20 years. Copper still leached into garden soil at concentrations that affect plant growth. Source: Stillwell, D.E. and Gorney, K.D., Bulletin of Environmental Contamination and Toxicology, 1997. The customers were still back at the lumberyard on schedule. The chemicals changed, the model did not. It is worth being precise here. This is not a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. No memo exists ordering the suppression of black locust.
What exists is something more mundane and more durable, a market structure that selected for profitable materials and allowed superior ones to starve for supply. No coordination required. Just the accumulated weight of investment in pine infrastructure, distributor relationships built on volume pricing, and a consumer base that does not know what it does not know.
In 2009, a timber framer named Ben Brungraber was hired to assess a covered bridge in Vermont, the Sanderson Bridge in Starksboro, built in The town needed to know whether the structure could be preserved or had to be replaced. Brungraber, a structural engineer who had spent decades working with historic timber, found something in the substructure that he later described in a professional context as the clearest evidence he had personally encountered of Black Locust performance in field conditions. Source: Brungraber, R.L., Traditional Timber Frame Research and Advisory Group. Documented case study. The sill timbers, the members sitting directly on the stone abutments, in permanent contact with moisture, were Black Locust. They had been there, unprotected, for 171 years. When Brungraber probed them, the outer surface showed weathering. The core was sound. He compared them to the white pine members elsewhere in the same structure, which had required replacement multiple times in the bridge's history. The Black Locust had never been touched. The Sanderson Bridge was preserved. Its Black Locust sills were left in place. They will likely outlast the stone abutments they rest on. This is not a single data point. It is a pattern that repeats wherever Black Locust was used in structural applications before the mid-20th century supply chain erasure. The Biltmore Estate pergola, the Harvard Forest fence posts, the Pearl Harbor pilings, the Jamestown corner posts. Each one is a single story. Together they form an indictment of every treated pine deck that has been replaced 3 times in the same span. What makes the Sanderson Bridge case useful is its specificity. We know the exact year of construction. We know the species. We know the conditions. A covered bridge, which provides some protection, but the sills sit in a water collection zone that would destroy untreated softwood within a decade. We know the outcome. There is no ambiguity about interpretation. The people who built that bridge in 1838 did not have access to peer-reviewed forest research or materials science reports. They had accumulated generational knowledge, passed from craftsman to craftsman, from farmer to carpenter, from indigenous knowledge holders to colonial builders, that told them exactly which wood to put where. That knowledge was not lost in a fire. It was not buried in a flood. It was slowly crowded out by a supply chain that offered something cheaper, more available, and good enough to last until the warranty expired. The town of Starksboro now has a restored bridge with 171-year-old sill timbers. The family down the road has a deck they built in 2005 that is already showing soft spots at the post bases. Both outcomes were entirely predictable. Only one of them generated repeat business. The Sanderson Bridge is one story. The pattern is continental. In Hungary, Black Locust covers more than 1 million acres, approximately 20% of the country's total forested land. It is not a novelty crop or an experimental species. It is an established agricultural system. Hungarian farmers harvested on rotation cycles of 25 to 30 years for fence posts, firewood, and export lumber. Hungarian beekeepers rely on Black Locust bloom for acacia honey, one of the country's most valuable agricultural export commodities. European architects specify Black Locust decking for public bridges, boardwalks, and urban green infrastructure, citing its combination of zero chemical durability and end-of-life compostability. Source: Rade, K. et al., Black Locust, Robinia pseudoacacia L. In Hungary, Research Institute for Forestry and Timber, Budapest, 2008. In 2013, the Brooklyn Botanic Garden installed Black Locust decking as part of a major renovation and received an American Institute of Architects Design Award, partly for the material choice. The wood was sourced from a small specialty mill. Because there are no large mills, there is no large supply. Source: AIA New York Chapter Design Awards 2013. This contrast is not subtle. In the country where the tree is native, where it grows without management across millions of acres from the Appalachians to the Midwest, it is a niche product available from scattered small producers, largely unknown to the general contractor market. In Hungary, where it was introduced in the 1700s as an exotic species, it anchors a mature, export-generating forest industry. The economic potential sitting untapped is substantial. The U.S. pressure-treated lumber market processes approximately 9.3 billion board feet annually. Source: American Wood Protection Association, 2023. If Black Locust captured a single percentage point of that market, it would represent 93 million board feet, a supply category worth hundreds of millions of dollars annually at specialty hardwood pricing. The demand is not the constraint. Studies of consumer behavior in the sustainable building space consistently find that buyers will pay a premium for materials with verified durability and reduced chemical impact when those materials are actually available at the point of purchase. Source: Forest Stewardship Council Consumer Research, 2022. The constraint is supply. And the supply constraint exists not because black locust is rare. It is one of the most prolific colonizing trees in the eastern United States, spreading rapidly into disturbed land, roadsides, and abandoned agricultural fields, but because the infrastructure to mill, grade and distribute it at scale was never built. The demand for treated pine created the mills created the distributors created the contractors, and the contractors created the consumers. Black locust was never given the same runway. NASA researchers studying drought-resistant vegetation for long-term land management identified black locust root systems extending to depths exceeding 200 feet, accessing water tables that no annual crop can reach. Source: NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Vegetation Water Use Studies. In regions where climate-driven water stress is already reshaping what can be grown, this is not a minor agronomic footnote, it is a significant adaptation. If you want to use black locust for fence posts, raised bed edging, retaining walls, decking, pergola construction, or any ground contact application, here is what you actually need to know to do it. Start with sourcing, because this is where most people get stuck. Black locust is not at your regional lumber yard, it is not at Home Depot or Lowe's, it exists in a fragmented small mill network that is expanding but not yet consolidated. Your best starting points are the following: the National Hardwood Lumber Association's member directory, filtered for your region, Craigslist farm and garden sections, in rural areas where landowners sell milled locust posts directly, State Forestry Agency, timber sale listings, where black locust occasionally appears as a salvage species in land management sales, and specialty suppliers who have begun national shipping in the last several years, including Groff's Mill in Pennsylvania and Lick Creek Sawmill in Tennessee, both of which have documented black locust inventory. Note to editor: verify current inventory status before publishing. Expect to pay $1.50 to $3 per linear foot for posts in the 4-inch diameter range, compared to $1.50 to $1.80 for comparable pressure-treated pine, a premium that disappears completely over a 30-year ownership horizon when you have bought zero replacements. When you are evaluating material from a small mill or a farm sale, you need to know how to assess quality. Black locust heartwood is the golden yellow to greenish yellow dense core of the log. This is the rot-resistant material. The sapwood, the pale outer ring, rots at rates comparable to untreated pine. It is the heartwood you want for ground contact. Ask the seller to show you a cross-section. For fence posts, you want the heartwood to dominate the cross-section, with no more than a thin ring of sapwood at the outer edge. A fence post that is mostly sapwood is a marketing failure being sold at a premium price. Pro tip: bring a small flashlight and a moisture meter. Heartwood that reads below 19% moisture content will accept finish better and shrink less after installation. Black locust is not forgiving of dull tools. Its hardness, that 1700 Janka rating, means you are cutting material harder than white oak. Use carbide-tipped blades, slow your feed rate by about 30% compared to pine, and do not fight the wood. If your saw is laboring, the blade needs replacement. Pre-drilling for fasteners is not optional. Splitting is common when screws are driven into dry black locust without pilot holes. Use a bit sized at approximately 85% of your fastener diameter, and use stainless steel or hot-dipped galvanized fasteners. The natural tannins in black locust will stain and corrode standard zinc-plated hardware within a few years. This is the detail that most online guides skip. For fence posts specifically, installation technique matters more with black locust than with treated pine, because you are going to be living with this installation for 50 years. Take the extra time. Set posts in tamped gravel rather than concrete, where the soil drainage allows concrete traps moisture against the post, which accelerates the degradation of the sapwood ring, even when the heartwood is fine. If you are in a wet climate, a gravel collar around the post base improves drainage and can meaningfully extend the life of any wood in ground contact. For black locust, this is a belt and suspenders precaution. For treated pine, it is the difference between 12 years and 20. For decking applications, black locust has one characteristic that trips up first-time users: it moves. All wood moves seasonally with humidity changes, but black locust density means the movement is slower and more pronounced than pine. Leave a gap of approximately 3/16" between decking boards when installing in dry conditions, or 1/8" in humid conditions. The wood will find its equilibrium. If you gap it correctly, you will have a tight flush deck in high humidity and a cleanly ventilated deck in dry weather. If you gap it wrong, you will have boards pressing against each other and a cupping problem by year 3. This is manageable. It just requires knowing it going in. If you have land, even marginal, rocky, depleted ground, consider planting black locust as a long-term investment. Seedlings are available from several state nurseries and specialty native plant suppliers in the $1 to $3 range per bare root sapling. Plant them on slopes where erosion is a problem, around orchard edges where the nitrogen fixation will benefit fruit trees, or in any area with compacted or exhausted soil. They will grow in conditions that would kill most hardwoods: poor drainage, shallow topsoil, rocky ground, full sun exposure.
A planting of 200 saplings on an unused corner of a property can, in 15 to 20 years, yield a harvest of fence posts for the entire farm plus material to sell, at a capital investment of well under $500. The harvest cycle for fence posts is typically 15 to 20 years after planting for straight managed trees. The pro tip that almost no general guide mentions: Black Locust responds dramatically to coppicing, cutting to the ground and allowing regrowth from the root system. After the first harvest, coppice stools regenerate shoots that are straighter, faster growing, and produce superior post material in as few as 10 to 12 years per subsequent rotation. European foresters managing black locust on a commercial basis have refined this rotation system to a high degree of efficiency. You are not starting from scratch. You can adapt their model directly to American conditions. Before you plant, source, or harvest black locust, there are legal and regulatory considerations that vary significantly by state and local jurisdiction, and this is an area where you need to verify specifics with your state's forestry or agricultural agency before acting. Black locust occupies an uncomfortable regulatory position in several states because, while it is native to the Appalachian region, it has naturalized across most of the eastern United States and into parts of the West. In some states, this naturalization has led to its classification as invasive, a designation that creates legal restrictions ranging from prohibitions on sale as nursery stock to active eradication requirements on certain land types. As of 2023, states that list black locust as invasive or noxious and may restrict its planting include New Hampshire, Wisconsin, and portions of the upper Midwest managed under specific conservation agreements. Source: USDA National Invasive Species Information Center, 2023. In these jurisdictions, planting on your own agricultural or residential land may be permitted, while planting on land adjacent to conservation areas or waterways may not be. Verify with your state's Department of Agriculture or equivalent agency. States in the core native range, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and North Carolina, generally have no restrictions on planting or harvesting on private land. The tree is recognized as a native species in these regions, and in some cases is actively promoted for land reclamation by state forestry programs. For sourcing and milling, black locust harvested from private land for personal use is generally unregulated in most states. Selling milled black locust lumber as a commercial product requires compliance with your state's timber dealer licensing requirements, which vary. If you are buying from a small mill, ask for documentation of legal harvest. The Sustainable Forestry Initiative and Forest Stewardship Council certification programs do certify black locust operations, and several small mills are pursuing these certifications as market demand grows. Regarding treated lumber alternatives, if a building code or permit in your jurisdiction specifies pressure-treated lumber for a ground contact application, black locust may be accepted as a code-equivalent alternative under the natural durability provisions in many building codes, which recognize species with verified decay resistance. The 2021 International Building Code and International Residential Code both include provisions for naturally durable wood species in ground contact applications. Source: ICC, International Building Code 2021, Section 2304. However, whether your local building department accepts this interpretation varies. Bring documentation. The USDA Forest Service Wood Handbook chapter on decay resistance is a credible source your inspector will recognize. Frame the conversation as a question, not a demand, and you will generally find building officials willing to engage with the data. One edge case worth flagging: in some western states where black locust is established as a non-native species on public land, there are active eradication programs using herbicide application. If you are harvesting black locust from public or shared land, even if it appears to be growing wild and unclaimed, confirm you have the legal right to do so before you cut. The relevant agency is typically the State Bureau of Land Management Office or the U.S. Forest Service District Office for the area in question. Here is something that almost no coverage of black locust mentions. The tree is at the center of a rapidly developing bioeconomy conversation in the European Union. The European Commission's 2030 Bioeconomy Strategy, updated in 2022, identified black locust, referred to in European literature as Robinia, as a priority species for sustainable biomass production in degraded and marginal land. Source: European Commission, Bioeconomy Strategy Progress Report, 2022. The reasoning is straightforward. As the EU accelerates its reduction of fossil-derived materials, it needs fast-growing, low-input biomass sources that do not compete with food production. Black locust grows on land too poor for crops, requires no fertilizer inputs because it
produces its own nitrogen, sequesters carbon at rates comparable to managed softwood plantations, and produces a timber product that commands premium pricing in the construction market. Several German and Romanian research institutions are now actively developing improved cultivars of black locust trees selected for straighter growth, reduced thorn production, and higher heartwood to sapwood ratios. The locust borer problem that makes milling difficult in unmanaged American stands has been studied carefully, and the emerging evidence suggests that borer pressure is dramatically reduced in actively managed, spaced plantations, as opposed to the dense competition-driven growth that produces the most beetle activity. Source: Vitkova, M. et al. Science of the Total Environment, 2020. In short, the milling problem that American lumber distributors cited as a reason not to stock Black Locust was largely a management problem, not a species problem. There is also emerging research on Black Locust flowers as a high-value pharmaceutical source. Robinin, a flavonoid extracted from the flowers and bark, is under investigation for antifungal, antibacterial, and anti-inflammatory properties in European university research programs. Source: Morich, I.M. et al., Journal of Natural Products, 2018. The full commercial potential of this is years away. But it adds another dimension to a tree that American land managers have spent the last century treating as a weed to be cleared. The deeper irony is geographic. Robinia pseudoacacia is named for Jean Robin, the French botanist who cultivated the first specimens in Europe from seeds sent from Virginia in 1601, 6 years before Jamestown. Europe learned to value an American tree more completely than America ever did. There is a fence post somewhere in your state that is older than your grandparents. It does not know what year it is. It does not know that the market moved on without it. It just refuses to rot. We tend to think of progress as accumulation, each generation knowing more, building better, lasting longer. But there are categories where we have moved backward without noticing, where the replacement of old knowledge with newer, more profitable knowledge left us with something genuinely worse, where the system that was supposed to serve us quietly optimized for its own perpetuation instead. Black Locust is one of those categories. The knowledge was not lost in a war or a fire. It was crowded out by convenience, by the fact that treated pine was at every lumberyard, in every contractor's quote, in every building code reference that listed acceptable materials. The absence of Black Locust in those places felt like a neutral fact of the market. It was not neutral. It was the outcome of decisions made over decades by people who benefited from the outcome. The good news, the part that is genuinely good, is that the tree itself never agreed to disappear. Cut it down and 10 new shoots emerge from the roots. Burn it and it grows back from fragments underground. The USDA admitted in 1948 that Black Locust cannot be eradicated from land it has claimed. Source: USDA, Black Locust Management Report, 1948. That is not a pest characteristic, that is a philosophy. Persistence in the face of a system designed to replace you. Refusal to become something lesser just because lesser things are easier to sell. We did not lose Black Locust. We just stopped paying attention. The posts your great-grandfather sank in 1920 are still standing. The knowledge is in the wood, waiting. You do not need a lumberyard's permission to recognize quality. You do not need a supply chain's blessing to plant a tree. Nature's lost vault exists for exactly this reason: to recover what works, verify it against the best available evidence, and put it back in your hands in a form you can actually use. If this video uncovered something you did not know yesterday, subscribing is how you make sure the next one finds you. Hit the bell. Every video in this series goes into a category of knowledge that the market has very little incentive to keep visible. If this one moved you, share it. Not for the numbers, because every share is one more person who stops buying something inferior every 15 years when something better has been growing in the ground, free, for centuries. The next vault opens soon. It involves a building material that has been used for 10,000 years, outperforms steel in compression, and costs less than concrete. Subscribe so you are there when it does.